I am really happy about how this particular drawing turned out, but just wait until you see this. Look at all the mess in my table. I think I'm going to take forever to clean this up. Hey guys, welcome back to another new video and let's get started straight away. The first thing that I'm going to do is tape the four sides of the paper so that I can get a clean white border, and also this is going to help the paper stay put to one place so that it won't move while I'm drawing on it. If you don't want to do it, then you can skip this step. And now I'm going to start with the sketching. For today, I'm using a H pencil by Camlin. You can use mechanical pencil if you want to. And I'm starting with the eyes first. And as you can see, I'm drawing the base waterline, that is the lower waterline first. And then I'll build the shape of the eye using that baseline as a reference. One thing to keep in mind is that you should never draw in one single stroke or using one single line. This way you get a very dark sketch and also you don't get enough control. You should always draw in small strokes or small dashes, and you have to adjust the shape as you go. And this way you get the shape perfectly, and also you won't be able to put a lot of pressure into your pencil. That way your sketch stays lighter. In every single drawing, the eyes can make or break your drawing. So take all the time that you can and draw the eyes as perfectly as you can. And once you have that eyes nailed down, you can move on to the other features, and you just have to mentally calculate the distance between the eyes and the next feature, the next closest feature to it, and then draw it. As you can see, I'm drawing this thing. I don't know what that thing is, but I'm drawing that next, and then with that as reference, that thing as reference, I'm going to draw the nose, and from that I'm going to build the outline of the cat. I'm going to do the same thing for the butterfly as well. I'm going to use the whole cat as my reference point, as my base point, and from that I'm going to calculate the distance between each of them, and I'm going to draw that. Another important thing that I have to tell you is that don't be afraid to erase your drawings at any point of time, because I erase them a lot too until I'm satisfied with the sketch. If you're not comfortable with a freehand sketch, you can use the grit method also. And now I'm going to lighten that sketch even further with a kneadable eraser. Now let's get into the fun part, and today I'm using a neutral hardness pencil by Camlin, and I'm going to start shading the darkest areas first. Now that I'm done with the first layer, I'm going to take a cotton bud and blend everything out. And since these are charcoal, they are pretty easy to blend, so you don't have to worry about that. Once you're done blending the darkest areas, don't throw away that cotton bud. You can still use it to add some very light shading to your drawings. Just like I showed you, I'm going to use the same cotton bud that I used to blend the darker areas. I'm going to add some of the shadings that I can see in the whites of the eye. And just remember, the whites of the eye are not plain white. They do have some kind of color to it, some kind of shadows to it. So just be careful to take a look at your reference image. And now I'm going to repeat the same steps again, starting with the darkest colors first. Once I'm done blending this layer, I'm going to use a kneadable eraser to lift off some of the charcoal from certain areas which I want to be lighter. So this is a good technique for you. And sometimes for even more brighter highlights, I'm going to use a stick eraser by Tombow. And by the way, all the materials that I'm using in today's video will be linked in the description box down below. So feel free to check that out. For this third layer, I'm actually working on the contrast that I can see in the reference image. As you all know, contrast is very important for anything realistic. If you have a very good contrast between the highlights and the shadows, then your drawing is going to look much more attractive, so work on your contrast. And now for a step 2, I'm going to use the pencil shavings of these charcoal pencils and a piece of cotton ball, and I'm going to use that to create all the darkest areas that I can see in the reference image. We do this to get a general idea about where the shadows are going to be, and also keep in mind to never shade any of the lighter areas. Once you've marked wherever the shadows and darker areas are going to be, you're going to take your charcoal pencils and you're going to intensify those darker areas even more. As you can clearly see, I'm using these pencils only in the darkest areas, and I'm using a cotton bud to blend everything out. And for some highlights, I'm using a kneadable eraser and also a stick eraser. We are going to use these steps again and again, so to summarize everything up, you have to lay down your color pencils and blend them out with cotton buds, and if you want any highlights, you can use kneadable eraser or stick eraser, and that's it. You should always have to keep in mind that you should never work in one single layer. Always work in multiple layers so that you can add much more intensity, much more shadows and much more contrast rather than doing everything in one layer and just calling it an end. Don't do that. Work in layers, build up that intensity in layers. That is the best way to make your drawing as realistic as it can. Now for our third step, you're going to use a stick eraser and you're going to erase these kind of fur texture, but draw it very randomly. That's going to make your drawing look realistic. And never draw it like this, like these straight lines or some unidirectional lines. Don't do it. It's not going to look realistic at all, and your cat is not going to look like a cat. Believe me. So this is exactly how you should never draw your fur, and as you can see, there's a lot of difference between these two, and the first one looks much more natural, isn't it? And now for the darker areas where you used your pencils directly, it is going to be a little bit tough for you to pull out that bright highlight. When you compare to the ones where we use the charcoal dust, it is going to be totally different, so you have to use a lot more pressure if you want a bright highlight. Exactly like I showed you, I'm going to use the stick eraser and I'm going to draw the fur texture, and I'm drawing everything in random strokes. Nothing is unidirectional so that it looks much more natural and much more realistic. If you don't have a stick eraser, by the way, you can always use your normal eraser, but just keep in mind to use a new one or else cut out a piece of your existing eraser so that it has a very sharp edge and use that for some highlights. Unfortunately, if you don't have a stick eraser, then make yourself fortunate and go buy a stick eraser, because it's going to be so much helpful in every single one of the medium, like color pencils or graphite or charcoal, you name it, you can use it for anything. So just go buy it. Now for the shadows, I'm going to use the charcoal pencil and I'm going to draw in small random strokes, exactly like I showed you with the stick eraser, so nothing new, nothing fancy. And also just keep in mind to vary the length of your strokes depending upon the area that you're drawing. And also vary your pressure according to the area. Now blend this first layer and repeat the steps again. Now let's start with the butterfly. Just as I said before, you have to start with your darkest areas first, and the main reason to do that is because when you press hard down on the paper with these pencils, it is going to create lots of dust, and we can use that dust for some shadings inside that butterfly. I'm just using the dust from these charcoals on the darker areas and I'm just moving it around and I'm shading the entire butterfly with it. Just like I did before, I'm using an E-double eraser to lift off some of the charcoal from certain areas, and for some bright highlights, I'm going to use the same stick eraser. And now, guess what? I'm going to repeat the same steps again until I'm happy with the intensity. Once I'm done, I'm going to erase all that smudging and I'm going to start with the background. And for the background, I'm using the same charcoal dust and I'm just tinting the paper so that it's not plain white. And if it's too dark, you can always use your E-double eraser. Now, if you guys noticed, I didn't draw any details on the lower jaw area, and why I did that is because there are lots of flyover furs from the lower jaw area that stood out from the background. So in order to draw that, I had to finish the background, only then I can add details to the jawline so that it will be visible for you. Yeah, this is just me making perfect sense. Now I'm just going to check for contrast and add if any, and then move on to the whiskers. For the whiskers, I'm using a white gel pen and I'm drawing it very slowly. Believe me, it might seem like slow motion to you, but this is actually real time. Just take a look at it again. I'm drawing everything very slowly. Finally, I'm taking off the masking tape and there is only one step left to go, and that is to use a fixative spray like this one. Before you use this, you have to give this bottle a very aggressive shake and then you're good to go. If you are going to use it, then use it in a very well ventilated room or in the outside. Outside is always better. And now, I have a good looking drawing and a very messy table, so I have to go clean it up. For your reference, I uploaded this drawing onto Pinterest and I'll leave a link to that pin in the description box down below along with the reference that I used. And until next time, bye everybody, take care.